Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Billy Wilder Theater. I'm Claudia Bester. I am the Director of Public Programs here at the Hammer Museum. I want to welcome you all to tonight's program celebrating the launch of the new book, Trans Hirstory in 99 Objects. Doubles as a workout item. The book explores trans art, trans activism, trans artifacts, and trans resistance from over 4 centuries. And it's part of a long-term project of artist Chris E. Vargas' Museum of Trans Hirstory and Art, or MOTHA, a conceptual art project that's forever under construction. This gorgeous new book charts a gender-neutral, trans-centric herstory of art. And for tonight's program, Vargas is joined by book contributors, editors, and artists Zackary Drucker, David Evans Frantz, Edgar Fabián Frías, Raquel Gutiérrez, Christina Linden, Amos Mac, and Uri McMillan to celebrate, discuss, and perform trans and non-binary magic, celebrity and activism, and trans-masc herstories. After the program, we invite you all to join us in the theater lobby for coffee, tea, and cookies, and we'll have copies of the book available for sale, and you can meet all of our wonderful guests in person. And now it's my privilege to introduce our first presentation by the one and only Chris E. Vargas. Word. Vargas is a video maker, an interdisciplinary artist, and the founder of the Museum of Trans Hirstory and Art. His work explores the complex ways that queer and trans people negotiate spaces for themselves within historical and institutional memory and popular culture. So without further ado, please join me in giving a warm hammer welcome to Chris E. Vargas.
Hello, hello. You two in the front get an A+. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for coming. It means a lot to me that you're here, each and every one of you. I'm about to give you the official welcome and intro to this project and book. And thanks for being here to celebrate its launch in LA with me. That's me. This is the project. Hi, again, Chris E. Vargas, an artist, founder, self-appointed executive director of the Museum of Trans Hirstory and Art, or MOTHA, an institution dedicated to highlighting the significance of trans art and hirstory to the current cultural and political landscape. That's right, not a patriarchal history, nor just a feminist herstory, but a gender-neutral, trans-centric art and activist hirstory. Thanks. I thought that was clever too. I founded MOTHA a decade ago, way back in June 2013, a year before Time magazine featured Laverne Cox on its cover and heralded the transgender tipping point, and 2 years before reality television and cable networks brought forth the transgender tipping point. That is to say that MOTHA served the early swell of our most recent wave of media fascination with all things trans. Thanks. In the early days, MOTHA was an attempt to critically examine the heightened moment of visibility when trans art and culture found an entry for the first time into many institutions that historically had been closed off to us. There was widespread misconception that trans people's lives would become universally better as a result of cultural attention and visibility, and I'm certainly not the first to point out that this isn't the case. This is clip art, in case you need a quote. You can literally Google a quote and get a fun background. Okay. More visibility brings more vulnerability to many, especially those of us whose lives are already precarious, those with less access to life-sustaining resources like jobs, housing, healthcare, education. In the past few years, trans children have also been rendered more vulnerable by a moral panic targeting them with bills that restrict access to bathrooms, sports, educational resources, and gender-affirming medical care. That is all to say that for many of us, visibility is not only a trap, it is also a slap in the face. MOTHA was founded to investigate the drawbacks of hypervisibility while honoring trans people who have persevered in the many faces of adversity. Yes, of course, our history contains stories of resilience, but it also contains countless inflections of resistance, creativity, beauty, drama, scandal, the full human experience. I started MOTHA because understanding myself and my experience in a historical context made me feel connected to something bigger. But I also wanted to examine what happens when marginalized histories get absorbed into mainstream institutions and exhibited on larger platforms. History is never stable. We always have a stake in it, and it's always dependent on the teller's subjectivity and political aims in the present. So how do we investigate and imagine a history of trans people when the language and identity categories we use or that are applied to us are constantly shifting? The separation of sexuality and gender, for instance, is relatively new. And while the term transgender is not that old, it means something different today than it did a couple decades ago. And language and identity categories will continue to shift and evolve. Considering so much flux, where do we look for our histories? Under what labels have they been filed away and where? And ethically, what responsibility do we have when we apply our contemporary terms and understandings of trans and non-binary identity to people and experiences in the past who had different frameworks to understand their own genders and wouldn't recognize themselves within our frameworks today? These questions apply not only when we look across time, but also geography and culture. As a critical project, MOTHA is a way to explore and engage playfully with these issues and questions, while also acknowledging and honoring an expansively defined trans and non-binary history. So, a brief history of MOTHA. MOTHA began with this broadside poster. In 2012, I asked my social media networks at that time, what was it? Friendster? No. To name their gender heroes, HIR, just to tell you what's on the page, and transcestors, the artists and activists and even fictional characters who made an impact or impression on them personally. I did so with an awareness that not everyone would call themselves trans, and I also disregarded the false binary of positive and negative images, recognizing that if I were to omit all negative representations, I'd have no one to show before the year 2012. Thanks. In parentheses, there's I joke, in case you don't laugh. Thank you. Over the course of the year assembling this broadside, I started to think about what MOTHA could and should look like, and if it's even possible to create a museum around an identity category that is slippery and unstable. And I asked myself questions like, who might be included and what would a trans art and history canon look like? Could I make that canon inclusive, which actually goes against the exclusive process of canonization? And what is the function of the museum anyhow? Who decides what's culturally important and what's worth preserving and exhibiting? What about the history of collecting and its relationship to colonialism? These questions only seem to lead me to more questions, so I walked into that metaphorical burning building and just made a museum. This one, in fact. MOTHA was officially brought into this world in 2013 by a modest but symbolic ribbon-cutting ceremony at the Yerba Buena Center for the Arts in San Francisco. Symbolic because even a decade later, I have yet to secure a plot of land on which to break ground for this exciting and fairly young institution. And did I forget to mention, but Claudia already blew my joke, MOTHA is now and forever under construction. Thanks, Claudia. The lack of a brick and mortar institution has allowed the museum to be fluid and take many forms. For example, in my role as executive director, I have given talks to packed houses, including this one, around the country about potential design ideas for MOTHA's physical space. For example, this is the design for the bathrooms, of course. Until recently, museums were not falling over themselves to extend resources to trans artists, so a goal of the project was always to leverage the possibilities afforded to MOTHA and myself by brick and mortar institutions to promote the work of other trans artists. I created the first and thus far only annual MOTHA Art Award in 2013, which drummed up a good deal of attention about recent trans achievement and was also the target of much criticism from people not content with the status of their own art career, I might say. Just kidding. It was legitimate critique, but I won't get into it. MOTHA also developed 2 virtual residencies, one with Tuesday Smiley and another with Jamie Diaz, both of whom appear in the book that we're here to celebrate, Trans Hirstory and 99 Objects. In 2014, Smiley approached me with the desire to create a line on her CV, indicating she had attended an artist residency. One marker of career success that galleries and collectors look for to confirm legitimacy. And so we made a graphic and a press release and created a residency. Simple as that. In 2012, I was approached by a friend of the incarcerated artist Jamie Diaz about creating a residency for her. And so an official looking letter on MOTHA letterhead, of course I have letterhead, and a certificate I think was used in Diaz's parole appeal because she was granted parole in 2024, for 2024, after 30 years of incarceration. I don't know if MOTHA has anything to do with that, but I'll certainly take credit. So, along with wedging my foot in the door of institutional spaces and shooing in as many other trans and queer artists as I can get away with, MOTHA was also always been a project of institutional critique. Through it, I have playfully and critically interrogated, excuse me, I saw there's water right here. With the project, I have playfully and critically interrogated the function of power of archives and museums, and I've also tried to expropriate and redistribute that power. Thus, that was too early, so oops. Let's go back. MOTHA claims museum status because museums carry cultural weight and establish public trust. Throughout the project, I have managed to fool people when they first encounter it, not just for the sake of fooling them, because, you know, trans people are sneaky. Joke, I can only do it in a room like this, but as a way to lure them into a critical stance. So to give some examples, in my presentations as executive director, I've proposed not only plans for MOTHA's new building, but also a lucrative commercial tie-in, including themed restaurants. You get the idea. And at the other end of the spectrum, when I was invited to contribute to SF MoMA's open space online platform, I presented a press release. A lot of early projects of MOTHA were press release adjacent. I presented a press release stating that SF MoMA agreed to repatriate a number of significant trans-relevant artworks from its permanent collection to MOTHA, where they rightfully belong. But even with this element of critique, I have often been surprised and dismayed by the capacity museums have to absorb and diffuse critique. There are many amazing and visionary curators who invite artists and projects into museums to take interventions and make interventions about institutional power in the hopes of initiating dialogue. But the cultural changes museums and arts institutions must make in order to have a real impact on the future, such as, to name a few, the repatriation and reparations of colonial plunder, divestment from the fossil fuel and pharmaceutical industries, taking important stances against occupation and genocide, and taking an uncompromising look at the white supremacist, patriarchal, and transphobic roots of Western culture. These changes don't come fast enough. So often it seems institutional critique only makes museums more powerful. They get to take credit for the radical ideas presented within their walls, and meanwhile, power structures and compensation disparities remain the same. Let's face it, any capital trans artists are likely to receive from showing their work is non-material. So if we want to leverage this exposure into sustainable lives, we'll have to do it ourselves. Serious. Okay, now to the book. Trans Hirstory and 99 Objects. Thank you. Most of my work as MOTHA has been focused on Trans Hirstory and 99 Objects, a project that initially took the form of a series of 6 gallery exhibitions and now culminates in the book we are celebrating today. This project is a visual and material exploration of various objects that hold significance in narrating the history of trans communities. And rather than try to outdo the British Museum's A History of the World in 100 Objects, or the Smithsonian's very American Act of One upsmanship, The History of America in 101 Objects. Both, of course, were influences for this project. MOTHA's chosen number of 99 sought to acknowledge in advance the limitations inherent in this undertaking. So the first 3 exhibitions in the series were creative and critical explorations of LGBTQ archives and collecting in North America, largely focused on regional histories. They took place at the One National Gay and Lesbian Archives in LA. Yay. The Henry Art Gallery in Seattle. Boo. Oh, yay. Just kidding. Kidding. At the Legacy Gallery, drawn from the Transgender Archives at the University of Victoria in British Columbia. And the 4th exhibition took place at the Portland Art Museum in 2018. And for it, I moved away from an exploration of physical archives and instead focused on a trans moving image archive. I made over the gallery to resemble a trans-centric video rental store. Remember those? No. The 5th exhibition here, MOTHA and me, Consciousness Raising the Stonewall Rememorialization Project, took place at the New Museum between the late 2018 and leading into 2019, which is on the lead up to the 50th anniversary of the Stonewall Uprising. Woo! I had a cough drop once, long ago. So for this one, I invited 12 artists to propose new memorials to the rebellion outside and inside of Stonewall to replace the current sculptures, get to that in a moment, that are out there currently in Christopher Park, out in front of the Stonewall Inn, which are deficient monuments, to say the least. And finally, the 6th exhibition took place in the summer of 2019 at the Oakland Museum of California in the show Queer California Untold Stories, and again focused on a regional history of the Bay Area. So all the exhibitions were always building towards this book, but the book is not a catalog. It's something entirely different. It's co-edited with Christina Linden and David Evans Frantz, 2 curators whom I worked with on 2 previous exhibitions, the one and at Oakland. And the 99 objects are each paired with texts by a range of writers, from scholars to poets, activists to popular historians. The format of the book allows for a more expansive approach, with alternative methods for including things lost to history, such as these objects represented by my own illustrations. And you thought I was just a fake executive director. And the 9 sections of the book serve to pull out common threads among the objects, but they are porous and by no means meant to deny the potential for objects to inhabit other sections just as easily. And one may approach the edges of each section as gender fluid. The first section highlights the refusal. These dividers also, I don't know if this is in my notes, but were drawn by Edie Fake. Beautiful, wonderful, amazing artist. The first section highlights the refusal of trans people to accept the unacceptable. Transformation is about physical, psychological, pharmacological, science fictional, and administrative changes to our lives and bodies. And the next section looks at how some of those transformations, for better or for worse, become hypervisible to the public. And when trans lives become visible, the inevitable cultural response has been sensation. And if we're lucky, we become deities. This section speaks to the spiritual, iconic, and transcendent within and among us. Discovery examines how we have been both the subject and perpetrator of invasive investigation. Restage reveals the impulse to reclaim various aspects of our history or reimagine shared cultural touchstones touchstones as trans-inclusive. Traces speaks to the clippings and fragments of trans lives and culture and the impulse to combat one's own erasure. And lastly, Spaces is about the places we create and defiantly demand for ourselves. So, as I stated earlier, the number 99 is inherently incomplete. Our history is still being written and will continue to be every trans generation moving forward. History is dynamic and alive, and it absolutely should be. This book, like everything else MOTHA has done, is a playful and impossible attempt to compile a cohesive history of trans art and culture while also acknowledging its challenges. It's futile but essential work. This incompleteness is an opening and an invitation to you to somehow, some way, contribute and insert and acknowledge yourself into that history. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Wow, what an amazing audience tonight. My name is David Evans Frantz. I am privileged to be one of the co-editors of this book, and just really thrilled to be here. And we have such an amazing lineup now. Thank you to Chris for giving that wonderful introduction to MOTHA. I'm excited here to introduce Zackary Drucker, who is going to be reading an entry from the book. She wrote about the trans icon and celebrity Christine Jorgensen. So for those of you who do not know Zackary's illustrious career and amazing work, I'm going to read a bio. Zackary Drucker is an American multimedia artist, director, and producer who has dedicated her work to telling stories that expand our cultural understanding of difference. Her credits include directing the Hulu original documentary Queenmaker, The Making of an It Girl, and co-directing the Sundance award-winning HBO original documentary film The Stroll, and the HBO documentary series The Lady in the Dale. She has performed and exhibited her work internationally in museums, galleries, and film festivals, including the Whitney Biennial 2014, MoMA PS1, the Hammer Museum, you might have heard of it, the Art Gallery of Ontario, the MCA San Diego, SF MoMA, among numerous others. So thank you so much, and please join me in welcoming Zackary to the stage.
Thank you, baby. Oh my gosh. Hey. Oh my God, what a gift to be here on my favorite theater in America with this incredible book. Congratulations to Chris, David, and Christina for just giving us an incredible object that we will never forget. I wrote about Christine Jorgensen, who would not have been my first choice necessarily, but I was honored. And because, she started it. I'm going to read you the caption first so you understand who this is if you don't know already. And then I'm going to read my little piece. All right. On December 1st, 1952, Christine Jorgensen, who lived from 1926 to 1989, made a public splash when she was outed by the New York Daily News with the headline, "XGI becomes blonde beauty." Jorgensen had been receiving gender-affirming medical treatment in Denmark when her shocking sex change story was taken up by the paper. A trans-media spectacle ensued. Unable to live the private life she had hoped for, she leveraged this sensational publicity and launched a nightclub act, made many television appearances, lectured at universities, and published Christine Jorgensen, a personal autobiography in 1967, all of which chronicled her own experience in her own words. In 1954, she commissioned this portrait by Lorraine Merritt. And I wrote a letter to her from, 2024, let's say. And it goes like this. Dear Christine, my mother was a toddler in 1953 when you came home from Europe with a fresh pussy between your legs. Not to essentialize you, but the global clamor that occurred after you famously stepped off the plane from Denmark was catalyzed by that man-made vagina. Having learned, you can laugh if you want. Having learned about your life then, as I have lived my life today, it seems to me that you were genuinely surprised by such a calamitous reception, stunned by overnight celebrity, yet still somehow prepared and dignified. Christine, your grace touched the world as the first transsexual superstar. You were a messenger out of time with the Cleavers and John Wayne, but every bit in sync with Marilyn and Grace. With gumption, glamour, and panache, you established a precedent of white woman respectability that transcends time. Your legacy is indelible, eternal. In 1954, you sat for a painted portrait, perhaps to commemorate the height of your fame, an age-old symbol of social prominence, forever sealing your status as somebody. You posed for photographs over and over again in front of this painting. Wow. You posed for photographs over and over again in front of this painting as a measure of time, and like most objects, it outlived your mortal body. What it must have meant to you to be created with care through hours of attentive witness, to memorialize one's own significance by the alchemical process of art making, is to bestow a part of one's own soul into a world inherently alien to our inner realities. No one's inner world is ever truly known by another, but it seems a most human project to externalize the unseen, that though we may be destined to live alone within, there is still a home in the body, and the art here, a window. I see the meaning that this image must have had for you in the public record of your life. Throughout the years, this portrait made appearances in photographs that were taken of you. It clearly occupied a place of prominence in your home in Laguna Niguel, Orange County, California. But it is in your death where I find evidence of its profound meaning for you. And its own immortal destiny. In your will, you bequeathed many things to the Royal Danish Library in Copenhagen, including personal papers and, of course, that portrait. So the window remains open, and you are known by others who are separated from you, not only by the boundaries of the body, but by time. Christine, you jumped through hoops of fire to appear on television and stand upon the stages where you are nothing if not beheld in the mind by an audience of others. We cannot control what they see when we stand before them, but we are still seen. On stage, you performed as a headlining chanteuse in order to personify a trans experience. Audiences came to witness an oddity, but they got a bona fide star, darling, and a charming ingenue. Did you feel at all like yourself beneath the stage lights? Home at last, in a world where transgender people have no place? Was it how you felt when you were made by brushstrokes? My mother was a teenager when she read your autobiography in high school. That text surely held significance for you. How could it not? Did you know it would be another window into a human soul, and that through it, your life would be ongoing in its impact on others? I'm grateful that it was written. Your autobiography was one of the precedents that my mother had for understanding me as a trans woman decades later. Flawless Sabrina, who once graced this stage many years ago, this very room, once said to me, "Pioneers seldom live to walk in the paths they cut." We walk in your path, Christine. We walk in the kaleidoscopic, ephemeral glitter of your wake. We honor your sacrifices, and we honor your grace, intelligence, and wit. We celebrate you. We mourn you. We see your luminosity through the window you left open despite the haze of time. With love, XOZ. Thank you all so much. We'll see you after the show.
Hi, my name's Christina Linden. I'm the third co-editor of Trans Hirstory and 99 Objects. And I'm so happy to be here with all of you tonight. Thank you so much for coming. I'm thrilled to introduce Uri McMillan. We had the honor of commissioning some artwork for this book, a number of works, including a sculpture by Kiwi Kaijan Thomas, and Uri wrote a piece to accompany that entry in the book. Yuri's a writer based in Los Angeles. He's published essays in Women in Performance, a journal of feminist theory, GLQ, a journal of lesbian and gay studies, ASAP Journal, and a number of museum or gallery-based publications, including for the Studio Museum in Harlem, Aperture Foundation, the MCA Chicago, and the Brooklyn Museum. So join me, please, in welcoming Uri.
Hello, everyone. That was a tough act to follow, but I will do my best. Okay. Flour, honey, Heineken beer, lube, yucky hair braids, crackers, sugar, and Vaseline. A tree stump burned at 550 degrees Fahrenheit for 24 hours until completely carbonized into a source of energy. Black bodies. Is a history of Black trans life a story of edible objects, coded communities, and pliant flesh? One where slippage, conjecture, trespass, opacity, and objecthood are historical givens? The acumen of Brooklyn-based artist Kiwi Kaijan Thomas is apparent in her ability to fold these queries and others into her deeply poetic and ruminative performance works that collapse the past and the present while juxtaposing mourning alongside celebration. Thomas, who identifies as Black, trans, and femme, continuously tries to stretch and break the taught containers around identities in her multidisciplinary practice. In her live performance and multimedia installations, Thomas repeatedly wields her own variously adorned and often semi-nude body as a pliant medium and an instrument of transcription, a quote-unquote new language, in her words. Hands Up, Ass Out, a collection of 7 years of work between 2014 and 2020, shown at Participant Inc. in New York in 2021, circumnavigated through loaded concepts: visibility, passing, disposable labor, chattel slavery, and Black femme caretaking, in bold and experimental works that were quietly powerful. Meanwhile, Thomas's 2022 performance at Periton Gallery, also in New York, entitled, quote, Come Hell or High, Femmes, Act 2, The Last Trans Femmes on Earth, Dripping Doll Energy, radically imagined a post-apocalyptic future solely inhabited by Black femmes. Alternatively doused in water or resplendent in glitter, Thomas created a communal space of affirmation while writhing to a soundtrack of brash hip-hop and contemplative ballads blended with a voiceover of her own poetry. Thomas's impulse to imagine a trans-historical poetics of Black trans life also informs her response to a shocking 1771 fugitive slave advertisement in a Boston newspaper for a, quote, Negro manservant named Cato, who was also known by the name of Miss Betty Cooper. The seemingly quotidian non-binarism openly alluded to in the wanted ad, and the ad is reproduced in the book if you look for it, is suggestive of the sly subversion of historical figures like Ellen Craft, who cleverly manipulated multiple disguises, racial and gender passing, feigned disability and class performance, in the name of fugitivity, rendering seemingly static identity markers remarkably elastic. And as William Wells Brown documented, such inventive and performative scrambles of identity were in fact quite common ploys for the staging of the art of escape. At first glance, Thomas's piece called Memories on Cotton and Sugarcane Receipts from 2022 may seem like a perplexing response to this history. Resembling a provisional monument of sorts, it recalls sculptor Barbara Chase Verbaud's bronze, wax, and braided sculptures, but on a decidedly smaller and lo-fi scale. At approximately 50 inches tall, the assemblage is also the average human eye height. Composed of a cacophony of heterogeneous materials, including cotton yarn, a blackened tree stump, bubble wrap, a hairbrush, black balloons, cardboard, ceramic snakes, and 3 years' worth of the artist's own hair, it alternatively is suggestive of an altar or vaguely an elusive, even mythic person. And yet, in my mind, this conceptual opacity seems purposeful, an object-based homage to our own magnificent ancestors, whose artfully designed camouflage was often in full view, while imperceptible to most, perhaps, except for perhaps those whose mutability was also a given. Thank you.
Hello, me again. Hi. Here it is. I'll just use this. Never mind what's happening. Right there. Focus on here, focus over here. I was hoping to stand in the middle of the stage so you could see my boots, so there's a little preview. Okay. Hi. Edgar Fabián Frías, our next presenter, works in installation, photography, video art, sound sculpture, printed textiles, GIFs, or GIFs, if you want to say it right. That's right. Just kidding, I have no stake. Performance, social practice, and community organizing, among other forms. Their art addresses historical legacies and acts of resistance, resiliency, and radical imagination within the context of indigenous futurism, spirituality, play, pedagogy, animism, and queer aesthetics. Edgar will be reading from the Shining Tarot Tribe deck, which was created in 2001 by Rachel Pollack. That's right. Thanks. You responded to your cue, thanks. In addition to being considered one of the foremost experts on divinatory tarot, Pollack, so now you know the tarot people in the audience. Pollack was an author of science fiction and comic books. As the writer for DC Comics' Doom Patrol between 1993 and 1995, Pollack introduced the character Kate Goodwin, who is the first transgender superhero in mainstream comics. So Yay, Rachel Pollack, and rest in peace, we lost her last year. So send your love to heaven. I don't know. Don't do that, sorry. Forgot I said that. Okay, help me, welcome to the stage, Edgar Fabián Frías.
Hello, everyone. Hi. We're going to be doing a collective 3-card tarot reading tonight. Yeah, you are free to participate if you'd like, or also you can just think about something else. If you'd like to not participate. This reading's going to be a little different. I'm going to be pulling 3 cards, one for the past, one for the present, and one for the future. And with each card, I'm going to share a story from my own life that resonates with some of the themes or concepts of the card. So because this is a personal story, and I don't know what stories are going to come up tonight, I just want to say that I deserve the right to opacity, so you might notice that depending on what story comes up. So I just want to invite you all to just take a moment to get grounded and help connect to the energy of this beautiful deck I have here, the Shining Tribe Tarot deck by Rachel Pollack. And if you want to either close your eyes or focus your gaze somewhere, I'm going to count to 3, and I want to invite us as a group to take a deep breath together. 1, 2, 3, inhale. Exhale. We'll do that again. 1, 2, 3. Staying present here with yourself as you continue to breathe. Focus on your body, on the energy in this space. I want to see if you have a question or an intention that you'd like to set tonight for this reading. It could be as simple as I'm here to be present and open, or you might notice something that feels really important that you'd like to know. I want to invite you to bring this question or intention to your heart. We're going to take another deep breath together as a group. But this time, I want you to imagine that as you inhale, you bring your air towards your heart. And as you exhale, you breathe out your energy towards this deck, imbuing it with your intention or question. I'll count to 3 again. 1, 2, 3. I want to invite you to gently come back, open your eyes when you're ready, and I'm going to start to shuffle the cards here. So we get our first card for the past, which is the Six of Birds. So I want to invite you here to take a moment and look at this card. Just notice what images and colors it has. Just see what your own intuition maybe starts to share about this card. So I used to be a social worker in the Bay Area. I worked at a big nonprofit. It was a really hard job. I had over 80 clients on my caseload. And so many of them needed so much support, from mental health support, medical care, financial support, housing. I was so overwhelmed. I could not do this job well. And I would ask so much for more money, for more time. And I just heard over and over again, we don't have money. We're broke, the government doesn't give us enough money. There's just nothing we can do. You just have to make it happen, make it work. And one day I was feeling really stressed out, and I spoke to my friend who worked in HR and was just sharing about how hard I was finding my job. And she said, yeah, I understand. And all they say is that they don't have money and that they can't do anything for you. She's like, but I feel like that's not true. And I looked at her and I was like, what do you mean? And she got really quiet and just kind of winked at me. And a few hours later, she stopped by my desk while I was doing paperwork. And she left a big pile of papers on my desk. And she said, do with this what you will. What it was our executive director's financial information. He was making over $500,000 in his position. This was during a time where the mayor of San Francisco was making just a little over $100,000. And he was one of the main people who would say that we didn't have enough. And so, as you would imagine, I started sharing this information with my coworkers. We started meeting in secret, we started talking, we started scheming. And after a while, we came up with a plan. We decided we were going to go together, the 15 of us, to the next board meeting. And we were going to confront him. And so that's what we did. And I was tasked to be the one to speak directly to him. And I remember how much I was shaking and trembling when I looked at him in the eyes and I said, you are the one who's always telling us we're broke, that we don't have enough money for our clients, that we don't have enough money to pay our social workers better, that we don't have enough hours, that we don't have enough resources. And yet here we know that you're making over $500,000 a year in your position, plus other benefits. We have people on hold who work with the media, and we will share this information if this is not addressed. And I was in an altered state of awareness by that time, as you would imagine. I don't really remember what he said. I just remember he looked so angry. But he resigned a month later from his position. So never underestimate the power of a sacred smuggler or the power of a group organizing in the darkness. So now we're moving to the present moment with the second card for our reading tonight. This is the energy of this moment, and it is so interesting that we get the Strength card, which is the card of the year this year. So again, take a moment, notice what shows up as you look at this card, as you notice the colors, the patterns. See what your own intuition shares about this card. So back in 2010, I used to live in Portland, Oregon, and I would hear the same thing over and over from my beloved queer and trans community. It was maybe a little different every time people shared it, but it went a little bit like this. Why don't these fucking institutions care about the work we're making? We're creating music and art, and all they're doing is platforming cis, straight, white men. What do we need to do for them to notice us? There was so much anger. And I resonated because I felt the same way. And then one day, a friend of mine approached me and said, "Hey, Edgar, I had an idea. I was listening to some Riot Girl, and I realized we can make our own music festival. We can create our own space for our own communities." And I knew that this was the moment that I was waiting for, a place to put this anger. So from 2010 to 2015, we organized the Not Enough Queer and Trans Music and Arts Festival in Portland, Oregon. We inhabited abandoned buildings, we rented out private spaces. It was all community funded, and we helped dozens of artists, musicians, performers share their art. And not only that, but people saw what we were doing and they got inspired and they had their own festivals, their own events. There were some that emerged in Edmonton, Canada, in New Orleans, in Oakland, California. We inspired others to make a seat for themselves at the table when others weren't willing to. So just remember, if there are people who do not want to share your art, create space for yourself and for others. So this is our last card, and this is the future. This is where we're headed. And we get the Three of Birds. Again, take a moment and look at this card. See what shows up for you. What the colors and the symbols share with you. You know, sometimes it's really hard to know when you're having a big moment, to know when something is really meaningful and life-changing. We've all built defenses to protect ourselves, to not see what's really there sometimes. And it makes sense. A lot of us have had trauma. We've had to protect ourselves. But then there are those moments when you feel your defenses lower. You feel your inner child show up and be with you in the moment and really see the impact of the present. Knowing that this life is not forever, and that this is all we have. And in those moments, you know you're not alone. You know that you're with Spirit, you're with our divine transcestors, you're held, you're cared for, you're seen, you're loved. And you just have to let yourself feel it and take it in. Thank you, everyone. I'd love to invite us just to close this space that we've created here together, to just take another deep breath as a group. I'm going to just count to 3 and invite us to take another breath just to close this space. 1, 2, 3. Thank you so much.
Hi, y'all. Thank you so much again, Edgar, for sharing that tonight. That was so beautiful. I have the pleasure to introduce our 2 next and final speakers. Each of them is going to read their entries from the book, and together they're going to then be joined in conversation to talk about trans and butch, trans-masculine and butch kind of hirstories throughout this project. So our first speaker tonight will be Amos Mac, who is an out trans artist, writer, and co-founder of Original Plumbing magazine. Woo! Amos has written and produced for television shows including Gossip Girl, Clean Slate, and Gaycation, and co-wrote No Ordinary Man, a documentary about the complicated jazz man and trans icon Billy Tipton, which Amos often also wrote about for our book. Amos will be followed by Raquel Gutiérrez, who is an award-winning critic, essayist, poet, and educator based in Southern Arizona. Gutierrez's first book, Brown Neon, published by Coffee House Press, was named one of the best books of 2022 by The New Yorker, and listed in the best art books of 2022 by Hyperallergic. So not to be missed. Raquel will be speaking about Nancy Valverde and these 2 important icons. So thank you so much. And I'm going to I don't know why I'm keep thanking everyone here, but thank you for being here. And please welcome to the stage Amos and Raquel.
Hi. Billy Tipton plays hi-fi on piano. 2 leaning model-esque women flank a suited fellow sitting behind piano keys. The man gazes upward, hands at the ready, pocket square detail, peeking out to say hello. School picture day smirk, barely touching on his 43 years. Billy Tipton has been in the ether for as long as I can remember. I first saw the cover of Billy Tipton Plays Hi-Fi on Piano from 1957 during a particularly desperate moment in ye olden days of trans Googling. Actually, since it was early 2000s, I was probably asking Jeeves. And what I queried Jeeves for specifically were websites that showed me a cache of famous trans men or proved that trans guys in history existed. Anything to link my experience to some sort of historical radar blip in pop culture, darling. My memory from this moment, which is not at all reliable, starts with the GeoCities website. Up pops a string of gyrating, low-resolution music notes. Billy Tipton's name blinks front and center with an oversaturated scan of a record album cover. Below it, facts lie next to bullet points. Stealth trans man. Father of 3 adopted sons. Married 5 times. Successful jazz musician and active in the 40s and 50s. Died from an untreated stomach ulcer. Outed after death. What happened to Billy Tipton after he died in 1989, penniless and in the arms of his youngest son, is nothing short of a wild reimagination of his career. With his posthumous outing by the coroner to the local press, or was it the EMT or his most recent ex-wife, Tipton's story blew up on the national scale and became fodder for talk show circuits and Star Magazine exposés, using language that we've left in the 90s for good reason. But with this grand exposure on his life after death, Tipton went from regional working-class jazz musician to a larger-than-life artist, a touchstone for some queer and trans people. While he was alive, Tipton never got too famous, some argue by choice. But he worked hard, and he rose out of Depression-era Oklahoma City, and he toured doing what he loved. He eventually became a band leader. He founded the Billy Tipton Trio, and he played until arthritis forced him to transition to a quiet desk job in Spokane, Washington. He aged in solitude, ephemera from his heyday, kept in scrapbooks alongside his black and white promotional glossies. What physically remains of Billy Tipton is this record, one of 2 he recorded for Tops Records. While Tipton wrote and performed the occasional original song, the songs on these albums are exclusively covers. In the 1950s, Tops released popular hits covered by relatively unknown session musicians to sell at gas stations and 5 and dimes. Priced at only 39 cents, a Tops record was a deal compared to 79 cents for an album by a major label. My favorite part of this album, besides the biography on the back, rumored to have been written by Tipton himself, where he shaves 5 years off of his age, naturally, is the cover photo. I imagine Billy Tipton played art director in this moment, requesting not 1 model, but 2. He looks up to the women with adoration, a willing audience. While the album cover image may look like camp today, Billy Tipton felt that he was serving the highest level of masculinity and class. Exactly how he wanted to be seen and how he hoped to be remembered.
Good evening. Nancy Valverde stands akimbo. She knows the streets of East Los Angeles in ways we never will. She spent her adolescence driving sex workers around its various neighborhoods, a place she landed at 9 years old when her parents spirited her away from Deming, New Mexico. not for the bright lights of the big city, but for the bridges of Islos that carried the neighborhood's working class Chicanos into the city's various industrial workplaces. Valverde has been working since she was 10 years old, she tells me, in her old Montebello home, just a few years before she moves into Triangle Square, a complex of housing units for LGBT elders in Hollywood. Valverde narrates her introduction to the types of underground economies available to bulldaggers as a mysterious dancing lady in a revealing red dress hovers above this old butch's head. It's a painting, a velvet painting mounted on the wall of her home. I read it as an altar to the femme supremacy that has led Valverde valiantly down East Los Angeles' shadowy back alleys to revel in and defend. Valverde stiffens to show how she stood in front of the door to listen for any rough stuff, arms folded over her chest, standing sentinel and keeping an eye out for cops looking for a reason. But she herself has had to look out for her own vulnerable state as well. I interview her as I am in the process of writing a play based on her life, The Barber of East LA, first produced in 2008 by the Queer Chicana performance group Huichtlalis de Panochtitlan that I co-founded in 2002. The play is about Butch Dykes surviving the hardest parts of the mid-20th century and the nascent trans-masculine arrival that awaits us in the next century. I sit and listen to her narrate her experience in the daddy tank, the notorious holding cell for masculine assigned female at births, AFABs, at the Sybil Brand Institute for Women, a correctional facility run by the county sheriff in Monterey Park outside Los Angeles. Valverde is proud of the ways she defended herself against other prisoners who had picked on her and saw her as competition for the jail's limited femme partners. But Valverde had bigger problems. Sybil Brand was considered a model prison with 5 sections: maximum security, minimum security, mental observation, lockup, and the daddy tank. The late Jean Cordova, in an issue of the Lesbian Tide, described the daddy tank as the worst section as it was maximum security for lesbians where prisoners were given the filthiest jobs and were made examples of. On Father's Day, 1974, lesbians of Cordova's ilk protested the existence of the daddy tank. It would take damage from 1994's Northridge earthquake to eventually close the prison in 1997 for good. Valverde's main jailable offense was masquerading in clothes not of her sex, a law that had been on the California books since the gold rush and was intended to allow for the harassment of those deemed deviant or gender bending. After conducting her own research at the Los Angeles County Law Library in 1951, Valverde was able to provide legal criteria to end her ongoing harassment and arrest, though masquerading laws in Los Angeles would continue to be enforced into the 1960s. Through all this, Valverde remained a popular member of her community in both Lincoln and Boyle Heights. After receiving her diploma from the Moeller Barber College in downtown Los Angeles, she became a tax-paying citizen on the straight and narrow path. Boo. Sad. She opened a barbershop on the old Brooklyn Avenue corridor during the 1950s. It was where she quietly established her reputation as a business person, a butch, a few words, but with a presence that commanded respect. The neighborhood itself was changing with the times too. Charlie, as Valverde tells me, was the owner of the bar that would eventually become Red's, where she would grab a beer between shifts. She remembers hitting the head in the small bar and coming out to find the bar owner standing in front of the bathroom door with his own arms folded firmly across his chest. Valverde never forgot that gesture of solidarity, and neither should you.
That was incredible.
Thank you.
Well, I'm so excited to chat.
Likewise.
I think that like what really excites me is that Nancy is someone you spent time with, and she's an elder who is still around.
Yes.
And who influenced your work. And I wonder if during your time with Nancy, did conversation ever shift or touch on the trans visibility that we are experiencing in the media or in, in the youth of today?
Sure. Thank you, Amos. Yeah, it's amazing being conversation here. And so, as far as I know, I haven't gotten any wind of Nancy Valverde's, if she, in the sense that I haven't gotten a notice of her passing, in the sense that she's far advanced in age, and is also someone to consider just someone who's lived a significant portion of her life in the 20th century and still continues to persist and make impressions upon our generation and ideally generations after us in the 21st century. So when I spoke with her, I spent a few hours in her small apartment in Montebello, and again in her elder housing apartment in Hollywood. And I think more than anything, it was a way to just travel through time through her, and to think about just the way that her identity has always been this interesting fraught, a lightning rod, an antenna, a lighthouse, just a buoy out to sea in times when you're just not sure where you came from, where you come from. And so for me, to understand her trajectory is really important. Was really important. And in terms of just thinking about, I think it tickled her to think about people curious about her experiences, and also softened her, because anyone who endured and survived the experiences that she had, I think would have been hardened and closed off and shut off. But those experiences gave way to wanting to connect and speak to power to what she survived. In terms of just the visibility, I don't know. I think she was touched and enjoyed seeing the Barber v. LA and was really moved. She came to our USC presentation of it in 2000, I want to say 6 or 7. It was before the mortgage crisis, because I feel like I was always in good spirits before then. So, but in terms of just someone who's impressed upon myself and yourself, and just thinking back to from the elder to the ancestor, and thinking about the life of Billy Tipton and how his story has curious, for you to say more about how Tipton's story has contoured your thinking about what it means to represent trans life as a writer, on the page, on the screen.
I mean, what's interesting about Billy is that we don't know, nor do we, there's no confirmation that he would ever want to be talked about in this setting as a trans person. That is the sticky, the truth around his identity, the best that we could tell from talking to his family members, talking to his exes and his bandmates, that he was happy, living authentically as a gigging jazz musician and a dad and a husband, and that he not sure how he'd feel about being talked about. And it's part of it feels complicated, but also he's someone that many people have looked to, and they've seen glimpses of themselves, and they've seen like this person was here before me, whether or not like the identity or the language around the identity matches up. It's an experience.
And how do you think? How does that inform your approach to representing Tipton's life?
Going into it without having the answers, and having the idea that his we don't have we don't have the same experience. Right. We just don't, and I'll never know. And yeah, there's a mystery.
For sure.
So I have to honor that, and yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Amos and I have talked about this moment in our own, I guess, creative life and creative adulthood and queer adulthood and trans adulthood, in the sense of where we occupy in the space and the spectrum of the elder and the ancestor, or thinking about our relationships to the elder and to the ancestor. For myself, the elder is still with us, and also the elder is someone that I am very slow to occupy that positionality.
Sometimes we're just given the title elder after we turn 40, and that's fine.
For sure. For sure, but to also think about the trajectory between the elder and the ancestor. I don't know if you've thought more about just your relationship to both concepts in the.
I mean, I remember thinking of people who as trans elders like 10, 20 years ago, and thinking of Jameson Green and Lou Sullivan, who was an ancestor at that time, no longer living, and just the ways that the objects, like going back to the book, how these things are still living with us and passing them down, like through, when you think about like the Lou Sullivan papers, the diaries, the FTM International newsletters, like those items are how I connect with trans ancestors. How about you? With objects?
Well, similarly too, and I think objects sort of gives a way to take the pressure off of the intense scrutiny that we often can't help but to project onto figures like both like Valverde and Tipton, in the sense that they are doing a lot of work in being visible and remaining visible for our sake. And so I think the objects is a way to sort of suffuse the historical context, and also a way to think about sort of these more joyful moments, or these moments of like thinking about Valverde's barber chair. It's an object of, it's a point of contact. And it's a point of contact around labor, but it's a type of labor that's very intimate. And it's an intimacy that happens in the context of a neighborhood, and the context of a neighborhood that's changing, and a context of a neighborhood that's going from Brooklyn Avenue to Cesar Chavez Boulevard. When I wrote that play, it was also in the context of the character based on Valverde is now the tax-paying citizen who is now on the is legit, has gone legit, and is trying to is striving for recognition and legibility as a respectable subject. And so, and as this is happening, it's 1980. It's the dawn of the Reagan era. And in that neighborhood, in that block in Boyle Heights, we're also seeing sort of the surge in East Los Angeles, in punk rock with East Los Angeles flavor. We have the long established, in a sense now, but back then it was newly established. Self-Help Graphics was a community arts organization on Gage and Brooklyn Avenue before it became Cesar Chavez. And Willie Aron, who is an artist affiliated with so many different arts collectives, and Chuy Velo were organizing punk shows and a venue became the Vex. And so I'm imagining these interactions between a butch that's striving for respectability and two punk teenagers, queer teenagers, who are sticking their middle fingers in every which way. So imagining these interactions, interventions, and feeling like it's a way to imagine joy, and to sort of take the heat off of the structural violence.
I liked I want to have like a fanfic moment of thinking of Billy Tipton gigging through Los Angeles and rolling up to get a haircut.
Yeah.
And like what that would look
Yes.
like
Oh, yeah.
for them.
Yes, it's fan fiction.
Yes.
It's speculative fiction. It is a speculative moment. It's also an auto-fiction because these are real people.
Yeah.
And so what does it mean for us to imagine these real people having these moments of recognition with one another?
Exactly. It's something I think about often with Billy. And I think, because there's characters in and out of his life that were trans-masc, that are not really, there's not much information out there about them, but it was obvious that Billy was not alone, but there was not a community. And that's one thing that I think was, there was communities in other places, but...
Yeah, I think in the sense of just a community in the ancestral and the sort of elder context, while they may have not had community, there is a point with my conversation with Nancy that it felt very important to her to be in contact with different generations, and I feel that's something that I internalize in the sense of being in contact with other makers and artists and writers and thinkers and organizers of different generations, and I learn a lot. And I think that's the thing that keeps me young. Oh, okay.
Awesome.
We have 2 minutes.
Oh, 2 minutes. Okay, great.
We didn't coordinate our we did meet and chatted over the phone, and we talked about questions and things. But
The red.
this
Accident.
was just kismet.
Yeah. I wonder about the idea of language and how it's shifting constantly around trans and gender experiences, and how can we best bridge the gap or respectfully honor our ancestors and our living elders without erasure?
Yeah, I think you said it in the sense language is very important, and also I think we have to move away from the burden of legibilities and the burden of being seen and honoring the continuities, or seeing it in the sense that there was that moment when Chris presented the ideal bathroom structure for the MOTHA Museum, and so generally I like the idea of well, yes, a spectrum, but also I also like the thinking through binaries, because binaries help us understand power, and so I think language is just a way to remain porous, and it's a way to also
Good
strive
word.
for conceptual promiscuities and genre promiscuities, in the sense, you went for fan fiction and I went for the speculative impulse, but it's about giving ourselves not just permission, but giving ourselves grace, and giving each other grace.
I love it.
Yeah, cool.
Awesome.
How are we doing? Uno minuto. And so, and I just want to hear more about just your, because I know you when I came to your work, Amos, an incredible photographer, and I know that you've always had, I mean, I can't imagine what your house looks like. I'm sure it's just boxes and piles and things of
I keep my piles in my own office. But yeah.
But yeah, if you could speak more to just what Tipton has opened up for your archival understanding of trans representation.
I mean, one thing that the Tipton experience has led me to is collecting trans history in the visual form through photographs, and looking for photos from the 1900 to 1980s. And that's something that has been my secret, not secret anymore, passion, and my just a way that I'm connecting with the past, and the language trans is not in the photographs, obviously, but it's it's there.
I'd love to see them. I'm sure people would love to see them, and I hope that you're able to curate them into
I'd love to,
another trans object.
I think so, yeah. I mean, all these objects just living together,
It's
just
true.
waiting to be
It's true.
shown.
Yeah, the afterlife of trans life. Yeah. Awesome. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
All right.
Thanks, everybody.
Found it. Hello, everyone. Thank you. This is the thank you portion of the evening. Thank you all for coming out. Thank you, every single one of you. Thank you, Christina. Thank you, David. We couldn't have done this separately, for sure. 175 contributors is a lot, and over the last couple of years, we've been oppressed by it. But no fights. We got along really well. Just I'm not faking it. And there's also, thank you to all the contributors who we had on stage this evening. Uri, Raquel, Amos, Zackary, Edgar, myself. Also, the people in the audience. There's a number of contributors that I know are here. Mo, for example, if you can stand up, can we give you Brontes? I saw you in the audience, who wrote about Vaginal Davis. Mo wrote about Murray Hill. Dante facilitated the connection with Connie Norman, important AIDS activist, and Java. And John. Dante and John, thank you. Who else? Any contributors that we didn't? MG. Thank you. Are you there? Are you there? Marcel. Hello. Marcel Pardo Arisa did a number of photographs for the book in activating a number of archival objects and artworks. And so many friends are here. Thank you for coming out and helping celebrate and honoring this really major labor of love.
We said Brontes.
Yeah, we did. Come on.
Brontes, yeah.
We saw Brontes. Jesus.
There's probably more of you we didn't see before the program started. So thank you so much for being here. Make sure you come up and let us know after the program that you're here. We want to say hello.
I just want to say thank you for driving out to the West Side at this ungodly hour. Thank you, Mom, for driving out from the Valley. And buy books. They're in the lobby, and we will sign them if you think we're celebrities like that. We're not. And we'll see you out there. Thank you again. Did I miss anything?
Thank you so much to the Hammer for hosting us tonight. And one more note, they've made it available for anybody who would like to register to vote, who hasn't done so, to do so out in the courtyard after the program tonight. So it's obviously a very important year to vote. I don't think we probably need to repeat that to this audience, but we're so glad to have you here. And please stay and join us for cookies and tea or coffee if you drink caffeine at this time of night, but we would love to say hello. So please stick around. Thank you.